Hey there, how there, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome to another Cutter Top 10 Sports video. And today we're going to look at football, not the New England Patriots football. No, we're not going to look at that. We're going to be looking at the top 10 most lopsided trades in NFL history. Trades are big and all that. And there's a lot of things behind it. And yes, there will be one Patriots trade, but it will not be high on this list. Trust me. Okay, first is number 10, the Eric Dickerson three-team trade in 1987. Eric Dickerson was this big guy from Southern Methodist who was a good running back. The Rams picked him high in the draft, and he worked wonders. 2,105 yards still has not been broken. And we are in a 17-game season, not a 16-game season. No, sorry, 18-game season. No, 17. But anyway, the Rams were fed up with Eric Dickerson's antics, so they decided to ship him to the Colts. As the Colts were trying to get respectability a few years after leaving Baltimore for Indy. But what also hurts, in a sense, for the Colts is that the Buffalo Bills were the third team in the trade, and the Colts traded away Cornelius Bennett and Ray Bentley to the Buffalo Bills, and Buffalo picked up some great stuff. I think Buffalo traded Greg Bell to the Rams, if memory serves me right. But yeah, the Rams Hall of players signed up for years, although the Rams were not really the best team in Los Angeles for a while. I mean, yeah, they were fighting the Niners, but they weren't in the finals, all that. Dickerson would not play well for Indiana, and then he went to Atlanta. Dickerson didn't do too much after that, and he was kind of a bust after he left Los Angeles. Number 9 is the Khalil Mack attack trade to Chicago, 2018. So Oakland had this guy from the University of Buffalo. I mean, name another great player for the University of Buffalo. Drew Willie? Yeah, right. Anyway, the Oakland Raiders had Khalil Mack, and they decided to trade him to Chicago for draft picks, knowing that they were going to have troubles with him. However, the Raiders could not really replace him, and Khalil Mack put up numbers beyond belief with the Bears before he went to the Bills and a few other teams. But yeah, the Bears screwed up by getting rid of him too. But yeah, Khalil Mack should not have done that. Number 8 is Randy Moss from the Raiders, to the Patriots 2007. Yeah, I know. You'd be thinking it should be top 5 because I'm a Patriots fan. I don't work that way, people. Anyway, Randy Moss was this great wide receiver from Marshall who people passed on because of his off-field issues, including Dallas, who got this. Did they get a wide receiver? I can't remember. But yeah, but the Vikings said, screw it, we're going to take him. And he put on a clinic, especially on Thanksgiving Day. 3 catches, over 150 yards, 3 touchdowns against Dallas of all teams in Dallas, and screwing them over. The Vikings went 15-1 in Moss's inaugural year. Of course, they lost the game thanks to Gary Anderson's missed field goal in freaking doors. Randy Moss was pretty good. In 2005, he pretended to moon the Green Bay um, audience and all that, and Joe Buck had a freak out. Randy Moss paid his fine straight cash, homie. However, he had some problems, and the Vikings decided to ship him off to the Raiders. After a few years with the Raiders, they decided to trade Moss to New England for a 4th-round pick. A 4th-round pick for a guy like Randy Moss. Moss sucked in Oakland. However, the Raiders were made to eat tons of freaking crow, as Randy Moss not only did well in New England, he set the single-season touchdown reception mark that Jerry Rice had for God knows how many years. And then Tom Brady with those 50 touchdown passes. That's not the record, but hey. Brady and Moss were a great pairing and should have given us the Super Bowl. Fuck you, Giants. Just saying. Number 7 is DeAndre Hopkins, 2020, from Houston to Arizona. Of course, COVID ruined a lot of things. Ruined all 4 major sports and all that. Baseball, we had the 60-game watered down season, and the Blue Jays couldn't even play at Rogers Center. They had to play in Dundee, and then they moved up to Buffalo for part of 2021, and then went to Toronto for the last part of 2021. Basketball, they had the bubble at Disney World. Hockey, they had to have bubbles on the Eastern Conference in Toronto, the Western Conference in Edmonton, with the Cup being in Edmonton, despite the fact that those didn't make the West. And the NFL actually had a bit of a break because they didn't need to worry about their season until September. when things got a little better. But anyway, the Texans had DeAndre Hopkins. He was great. He was a great guy from University of Clemson. He was a great pass catcher, but then they decided to trade him to Arizona for a running back, David Johnson, and draft picks. David Johnson was okay for Houston for like 1 or 2 years, but DeAndre Hopkins has basically given the Cardinals and Kyler Murray some powerful speed and all that. Houston has had a few good moves, but anyway. Number 6 is Marshall Faulk from the Colts to the Rams. You're 99. Marshall Faulk came from San Diego State. He actually had at one time the most rushing yards in a NCAA game. And then the Colts decided to pick him up in the first round of the 1994 draft to be a good running back. And he was. He was pretty good and all that. And helped out. But the Colts decided to have something else in mind. They had a high draft pick in 99 thanks to their crappiness in 98. And no, Peyton Manning did not lead them to the Super Bowl. Anyway, the Colts had a good pick, but they also had their eyes on this running back by the name of Edgerrin James from the University of Miami. They got him, and then they decided to ship Falk off to St. Louis for draft picks, mostly because they wanted to nurture Edgerrin James. Now, the trade wasn't half bad because Edgerrin James was effective for the Colts, I'll be honest with you. But Falk became an NFL MVP. He was part of the West Coast offense with Kurt Warner being the quarterback and Asa Keem, Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce at wide receiver. And he won a Super Bowl ring. He could have won 2 if it wasn't for Tom Brady. But anyway, yeah, Marshall Faulk to the Rams, it was big. And did Edgerrin James become part of a Madden cover, although it was a Madden curse? No, we didn't, because I played the shit out of Madden 2003 with Faulk on the cover. Number 5, the John Elway trade, 1983. John Elway was this great passer for the University of Stanford. He lost his final game to Cal. The play, they lateral and Kevin mowing over the Stanford Trump player Gary Terrell and all that. But yeah, John Elway was a great player and all that. But yeah, Stanford lost a chance to play in the Hall of Fame Bowl back when bowl games were like 5 or 6 in shape. Anywho, Elway was good, and Baltimore had the number 1 pick. They went 0-8-1. They had troubles. Arch Leister was booted for gambling, and Mike Pagel was of no help. So the Baltimore Colts decided to go back to pivot and decided to get John Elway. However, Elway refused to play for Baltimore. There were many reasons. A few of them you know, and one you pretty much don't know. Anyway, Elway did not like Baltimore's system. He thought that the team sucked, and pretty much, he was a better fit for the Yankees minor league baseball affiliates and all that. And also, what people forget is that Baltimore's coach at the time was Frank Kush, who got himself booted from Arizona State because of his bull ring practices and all that. Although in 1996, they welcomed Frank Kush back with open arms. Anyway, yeah, so Kush was the Baltimore coach. And since John Elway and his father Jack were both at Stanford and knew Frank Kush from Arizona State and the Pacific 8, the Pacific 10, Elway knew that it was a bad idea. So Elway did not do it, and then a week later they traded him to Denver for Chris Hinton and other things, and Mark Herman to be quarterback. Denver said, "Thank you very much. Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto." And Elway led them to 4 Super Bowls. Despite the fact they didn't win any Super Bowls, at least he led them to Super Bowls. Whereas Baltimore had their own problems with Robert Irsay moving the team in the middle of the night using Mayflower moving fans to Indianapolis, who built a stadium for football. The Colts franchise would not get decent till the mid-90s. Elway did win 2 titles with Denver, obviously, and he's a Hall of Famer, and, that's big. Number 4 is Brad Favre to the Packers, 1992. Brad Favre was this guy from Southern Miss who had a famous Hail Mary to beat Louisville at Louisville Stadium. Atlanta in the second round decided to take Brad Favre, although they butchered his name. And unfortunately, he was not a fan favorite. And Jerry Glanville basically didn't like him. And Brad Favre kind of had this attitude about him. So basically, he played himself out of Atlanta. And Falcons gave up on him. Green Bay needed a quarterback to back up Don Magic Man Makowski. So Green Bay decided to trade Atlanta a first round pick. Everyone thought Green Bay was full of shit because a first round pick for an unproven guy like Brett Favre. Well, history has always made us laugh and basically made us eat crow. As Brett Favre won 3 MVPs, won a Super Bowl with the Packers, and let's not forget when Mikowski went down injury against the Bengals. Favre came in, helped the team win, and then he started the next week against Pittsburgh, and the rest was fucking history because he never gave up a start in his Packers career. So anyway, Atlanta would beat Crow, although they tried to get a running back. I think that was Tony Martin, but it didn't work out. Number 3, Steve Young to the Niners, 1987. Everyone thought the Niners were nuts trying to use Steve Young when they had Joe Montana in 1987. So at the 1987 draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who had Steve Young, decided to trade Steve Young to San Fran for draft picks. Steve Young was a great player for BYU, a pivot in the same vein of Jim McMahon and Robbie Bosco. But anyhow, Steve Young would go to the USFL. He didn't want to play in the NFL. Well, Tampa Bay held his rights, and then once the USFL folded, Tampa had him for a year. They basically let him go because of Hugh Culverhouse being fucking penny pinching and all that. So they traded him to San Fran for round picks. Steve Young was basically put in to put a fire under Joe Montana because the Niners had 2-star quarterbacks and people were complaining. Steve Young did play many games. But he was always going to be the backup to Montana until an unfortunate injury in the 1991 NFC title game between the Giants and the Niners when Leonard Marshall knocked Joe Montana out of the game and pretty much the whole 91-92 season. Steve Young produced, he did well, and the Niners had to get rid of one of them. And they got rid of Montana to Kansas City. Steve Young ended up winning the Super Bowl in 1995 and got the monkey off his back. Number 2 is the Ricky Williams draft trade in 1999. In the year 1999. Anyway, so Ricky Williams was this high prospect, Texas running back who set the record for rushing yards, beating Tony Dorsett's mark. He was pretty good. Cleveland could have had him first overall, but they took Tim Couch. Kind of a bad move, especially when your fans cheer Tim Couch getting hurt and Kelly Holcomb coming in. Then Philly went second, and everyone thought, oh, Philly got Ricky Williams, but they decided to get this quarterback from Syracuse by the name of Donovan McNabb. The Eagles fans booed the shit out of McNabb. Well, guess what McNabb did? He got you to 4 straight NFC title games, so shut the fuck up. So other teams passed on it. New Orleans looked at Washington who had the 5th pick and decided to trade their entire 1999 draft and a few picks from 2000 to Washington to get Ricky Williams. Ricky was okay, but he wasn't the power guy for New Orleans that they always wanted. The Saints gamble backfired. Mike Ditka's thing backfired. And Washington got some picks. I think it was Chris Samuels and LeVar Arrington who kind of got picked with those things, among other people. But yeah, that was pretty big for Washington. Ricky Williams would end up being in Miami, fail a drug test, flee to Toronto with the CFL, and then come back to the Miami Dolphins and kind of pick up his career. And finally, number 1, you can probably guess. Come on. It's the Herschel Walker trade, 1989. So the Herschel Walker trade was big. Herschel was this great guy from the University of Georgia. He went to the USFL to play ball and was pretty good. Dallas had his rights. He was good for Dallas. He was pretty much the only good thing for Dallas in the mid-'80s. And then, of course, Jimmy Johnson would be the new head coach replacing Tom Landry, thanks to the new owner, Jerry Jones, because he knew Jimmy from Arkansas. So, woo! But anyhow, Herschel was the only good player. Minnesota were in the eye for a running back. They thought they were running back away from being playoff contenders. They actually wanted to go to Cleveland and get Kevin Mack. Unfortunately, Kevin Mack was suffering from a drug suspension, so they had to change course. So Minnesota traded away 5 players and 5 draft picks to Dallas to get Herschel Walker. Herschel did get to, I think, 1 or 2 playoffs with the Vikings, but not much else. He then went to the Eagles. He even went to the Olympics as a bobsled pusher. So anyhow, that worked out as well as age as well as milk. Dallas would use the haul of picks to build a dynasty, not just to pick players, but to trade those picks for other picks and all that. And one of the biggest moves was Emmitt Smith getting one of those picks and all that. Although the Vikings, the guys they traded were pretty good, but them's the breaks, and unfortunately Dallas got the breaks. Anyway, I'm jumped. I'm going to do